the participants' experiences, I will refer to as my co-author's stories from here on. First, I would like to start with Douglas's experience. He says, this was the 80s. There was racism. You had to fight that and try and get an education at the same time. To start us off now, think about this. How many of us are dealing with this today? This is exactly why I decided to invest my time and money into writing and getting Black Pupils Matter, our experience of the English education system, 1950 to 2000, published. Now, in terms of my background, Dave has touched on everything that I wanted to say there. So born in Uganda, Africa, I moved to England. I've done a degree in accountancy and a master's degree in applied project management. I'm an educator, homeschooling my 4 children, as Dave said. One is at early years foundation stage, which in England is under 5. One is at key stage 1, which is between 5 and 7. Key stage 2, which is between 7 and 11. And I've got one at university. So very busy. And on top of that, I'm doing this really, really exciting project, as Dave said, where I explore the experiences of Black LGBTQ students. And I'm lucky enough to be comparing the experience in the UK, in North America, and in South Africa. And I am open to, if anyone wants to really know more or wants more information about the project or my ethics approval, please contact me at wasuk@outlook.com. So I go straight into my co-author, Deborah, who suggests that had they introduced more of the Black culture way of living, a lot of false information would have been erased. Maybe we could all have understood that we are equal. Black Pupils Matter was published this year, and it has 120 pages. The book examines the English curriculum and teacher pedagogical approach and investigates how both impact the academic performance of Black pupils. My co-authors experienced the English education system between 1950 and 2000, and we were able to compare their education experiences as pupils, parents, and educators. Black Pupils Matter is suitable for academics and general readership. My co-author, Dean, tells us that I was nowhere in the subjects I was taught. The boys in the books were blonde, blue-eyed. How could I find any interest in only reading books that had white people in them? I hated the slavery lesson. I could feel all those white kids looking at me. In fact, I remember the kids saying I looked like some of the kids we had seen in the lesson. It was horrifying. We do not include Black people, and when we do, it is in a derogatory way. So when exploring the curriculum, my co-authors talked about representation in literature, in history, in geography, and religious education. They also told of what the staff room looked like and how this affected them. We also examined sets, looking at who was in the top or bottom, on what basis these allocations were made, how this made my co-authors feel, and how it impacted their academic performance. And finally, for the curriculum, my co-authors talked about expectations set at school and home. They addressed issues around how expectations were set and how this impacted their academic performance. So Deborah expresses that, while at school, I did not feel represented in the curriculum. As someone from a mixed race background, I would have liked to see more about other races. When you're growing up, it is very important to learn about where you come from. For me, there was nothing about my identity. I found my identity from my family. Thinking about Deborah's experience, how many of us go to schools or colleges where the staff room, classroom or lecture room, playground, canteen, and other places look like this? How does this impact your idea about your identity? Now, 95% of my co-authors reported a lack of positive representation. And we know from data that issues with identity lead to individuals feeling a disjointed self of oneself. which then triggers psychological distress. Could you be experiencing this at the moment? And Darcy warns us that another area is the lack of Black books, which really hurts Black kids. This causes them to lose themselves and their self-esteem because they are around a culture that tells them that Black is worthless and has not contributed to the country. Data has also shown us that the lack of diverse literature says to children that it is only white people that have said something that is worth printing. This potentially destroys a child's love for reading, which might negatively impact their ability to comprehend and understand text. It further disadvantages them because, depending on the country, English language can be the thread that links all the subjects in the curriculum. So Dylan points out that I was in the top sets for English in year 1, 1-1. In year 2, I was in 2-1, still in the top sets. Year 3, 3-1. Year 4, 4-1. Year 5, 5-1. I started questioning the teachers, which landed me in a lower set. That's 5-3. That was where the pupils were more disruptive than anything else. So 81% of my co-authors were in bottom sets. Some of those lucky enough to be in the top sets had a traumatic experience. They did not have friends, were put under so much pressure to get every question right. This caused anxiety, which data tells us can be linked to post-traumatic stress disorder, and in some cases, social phobia. Now, my co-authors in the bottom sets report having more Black friends to turn to. However, the classes were disruptive, not challenging, and some tell of being held back from attempting higher papers in math and science. Now, similar to some of those from the top sets, they reported symptoms of anxiety and depression, which can be linked to panic disorder and could have explained why some skipped school altogether. Some told of automatically being placed in the bottom sets because English was their second language, which held them back. In some cases, this was not appropriate because my co-authors had immigrated from an English-speaking country and they were very capable in reading, writing, and spelling. So without the appropriate tests and support, some felt that social services and the education system had failed them. Delilah expresses that the expectations set for me in primary school were low. I proved them wrong. It was the same for secondary school. I think expectations were set based on race for Black pupils and class for some white pupils. So regardless of your class as a Black pupil, the expectations were the same as a lower class white pupil. This made me work harder. I do not know what the solution is. And I know that 71% of my co-authors said they were set low expectations. A teacher's opinion of a pupil was far-reaching in some cases. My co-author, who was told they weren't good at math, carried this fear into their teaching. A teacher can make you or break you from very early on, said some. Some of my co-authors still carry these scars and are very traumatized. According to data, low expectations have been linked to a lack of self-esteem, which could impact behavior and engagement. So just like Delilah, some of my co-authors showed resilience and worked hard to prove their teachers wrong and indeed got good grades. Some reported that it wasn't the teachers, but expectations set at home that primarily motivated them to succeed. And in spite of their schooling experience, some of my co-authors have gone on to become teachers, lecturers, professors, and strong pillars of the community. And Doris points out that children have to be at the center of recruitment and why we get into teaching and not the other way around. In every job I have done, the young person continues to be at the center. Sorry if a teacher doesn't have that. No unconscious bias training is going to correct this. I am very suspicious. I have seen teachers who love their subject, but do not love children. So in line with Doris, 95% of my co-authors reported that pedagogy significantly impacted their academic performance. When exploring pedagogy, my co-authors talked about the power and control dynamics between teacher and pupil. This is something that Paulo Freire points out in his book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where he, among other things, addresses issues around who the custodian of knowledge is and who the haves and have-nots are. This has a significant impact on the ability of pupils to talk in a classroom environment. And we indeed address talk in this book. In terms of classroom size, we explored how the teacher-pupil ratio impacted learning. And for classroom setup, we examined who decided on the seat arrangement and whether my co-authors sat at the front or back. We also examined what the experience was like and how it impacted their learning. Finally, we looked at the teacher-pupil relationship, whether race, gender, and age matter. So Dylan highlights that the teaching styles that I enjoyed are the ones I have used as a teacher. It is effective to involve the student in what they are learning in one way or another. As a student, I enjoyed the engaging styles of Mr. Cleo and Mr. Samuel, the only Black teachers in school. Learning is about who teaches you and how they teach you. 76% of my co-authors reported experiencing a teacher-led style of teaching. In the majority of cases, the teachers were the haves, pupils have-nots. Some of my co-authors testified to only speaking when spoken to. The teacher delivered and they listened. However, data has shown that talk could be an effective tool for cultural and pedagogical intervention in human development. Some reported that teachers were very strict, which caused fear, anxiety, and overall, this affected their self-esteem and confidence. Some teachers or even a headmaster could not control the class of pupils and resorted to violence. My co-author, Dawn, talked about being bullied by the teacher. She was shy, and this teacher made an example of her, all because he could not control the classroom. Dawn says it was so bad that her peers stood up for her. And a bit more about Dawn's experience. We had around 27 to 30 pupils in a class. The numbers impacted learning. I grew up in a socially deprived area and a lot of the children had learning difficulties. There was a lot of fighting and displays of bad behavior. Teachers found it difficult to manage the behavior and lessons were disrupted as the teacher went off to get the headmaster. The majority of my co-authors tell of sitting in rows and at the back next to their friends. This decision was sometimes based on self-esteem and confidence, and this resulted into my co-authors disengaging from the lesson and sometimes poor academic performances. Where a pupil sits could be linked to anxiety and social behavior. It has also been suggested that sitting front and center could lead to higher retention of material, easier access to the teacher, and increased participation and notes taking. So I wonder how many Black pupils get the opportunity to sit front and center. And this is from Dolores. When I had problems with my math teacher, I approached another teacher who was Black. I remember talking to him about my experiences in the classroom, and my mom talked to him as well. The Black teacher supported me and would explain things I had not understood in the lesson. Thanks for his help, I did well in math. Schools should provide to the students and parents a list of teachers and timetables of when they are available to help. Teachers can make you or break you. 95% of my co-authors said that the teacher-pupil relationship was more important than the curriculum. Anyone can deliver a curriculum, but it is who and how they deliver that most impacts learning and one's academic performance. In the words of Dolores, a teacher can make or break you. In addition, cultural differences played a role in how comfortable my co-authors were around white teachers. Some told of that one Black teacher that saw them through school, while others reported being terrified of teachers that they dare not approach them in or outside of the classroom. A poor teacher-pupil relationship could result in anxiety, depression, and long-time mental health issues. My co-author Delilah may forever carry these scars inflicted by her maths teacher. So at the very start of writing Black Pupils Matter, I was interested in finding out what this thing that we call education is. Along this line of questioning, I found out that until the 15th century, schools in Europe were controlled by churches, and it was all about religious values. Then rulers and governments alongside churches controlled education. I also found out that you were educated based on class, religion, gender, and geographic location. Something else I was really interested in was class and actually religion because of my population of interest, who were Black people. So I came across this extract where Russell tells us about the poor who lived in England during the 18th and 19th century. He says that when it came to educating the poor's children, Sunday school teachers were instructed to tame the ferocity of their unsubdued passion, to repress the excessive rudeness of their manner, to chasten the disgusting and demoralizing obscenity of their language, to subdue the stubborn rebellion of their wills, to render them honest, obedient, courteous, industrious, submissive, and orderly. I found this quote very, very relevant to my own experience with the English education system, and so did some of my co-authors. As we see, 76% reported lower levels of academic performance, which could have been linked to some of the above Sunday school teaching techniques. It has been suggested that institutional racism is as much here as in the 50s, but it is more covert. In the book, I recommend that Black pupils would benefit from schooling that offers a global curriculum, which includes a balanced approach to the syllabus. African and Caribbean history and geography introduced as early as Key Stage 1, which is between the ages of 5 and 7. I recommend we stock books by Black authors in schools, local libraries, online resource providers, and we have mixed ability groups. And in agreement with my co-authors, I recommend an urban pedagogical approach. And what I mean by that is that schools recruit more Black teachers and staff to ensure equity, and that the staff from and elsewhere are representative of the 21st century societies that we live in. The same should go for student bodies and societies. We need Black students to have a seat at the table, so they are part of the decision-making, not only about how they are taught, but also about how the school is run. Teachers and other training programs should incorporate cultural awareness training, institutional racism, mental health, amongst other things. So in conclusion, my co-author Dylan reminds us that teachers control the school space. They will determine your outcome. So I tell Black parents to prepare their children so they know when to challenge teachers and when not to. Brief your children and debrief them as you're sending them out into an enemy environment. And in light of this, I would encourage the Black community to remember that we live in a society that does not celebrate us and continues to silence us. This may make us feel disconnected from society at large. So writing Black Pupils Matter, has taught me that it is my responsibility to highlight the Black experience from a Black perspective. And that when we as a community realize that our stories are similar, then surely we know we are not the problem, but the system. And we can use this as a tool for empowerment, healing, and continue to fight for social change. Again, I want to remind you about my current research project, my PhD, which is entitled Quadruple Consciousness, the Transatlantic Experiences of Black LGBTQ+ Students in Higher Education Institutes in the UK, North America, and South Africa. For more information, you can reach me via my email, wasuk@outlook.com. I'm on Twitter as well, or lowercase, Wasuk Sule-Pearce. Facebook, Wasuk Sule-Pearce again, or you could look at my website to see all the projects I'm involved in, to see the resources and any books or any blogs that I write. And I want to thank you very much for listening. And yeah, I'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wasuk. Very informative. And so at this point, if the audience has any questions, you can just type them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll allow you to speak your question. As we wait on the audience, I was wondering, Wasuk, so first of all, methodologically, I have to kind of, give you some kudos, because you consistently refer to your study population as your co-authors. And I know that that's a deliberate attempt to sort of bring them into that this is their story and you are basically the conduit of the story. So kudos for that. One of the things that occurred to me was, okay, so are the experiences you've researched the same or similar for Black Britons? That is, were these students immigrants, or were they born in Britain? And the question came out of hearing you talk about the language issue. That language is used as a sort of barrier, that the assumption is they don't speak English. But if these are Black students born in Britain, how is that so? So I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about whether this is the same for Black British students or not.
So yeah, thank you very much for that question. Very relevant question. So the population included both diasporic students, so Black pupils that were born in England, and then we had some who had just immigrated. And so you could say that language actually applies to both, because the ones that my co-authors that were immigrants felt that they had an accent, but so did the Black diasporic pupils that were born in England. In most cases, they do have an accent, and that might be from the household, or it might be from their friends. So that's really interesting, because I would say that language actually applies to both. Because again, when it comes to language, yeah, there is an accent, and there is, I don't want to say there is an acceptable way to speak, but it is definitely different. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I was on mute. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, so basically, you're saying that color is at the forefront of everything, skin complexion, and then assumptions are made and behaviors are patterned based on that, regardless of digging in deeper into what's going on. I was wondering, how does the LGBTQ plus dynamic fit into this conversation? I know there's the intersection of sexuality and gender and so on. So in those cases, is it where do you position race in the discussion? Is that a forefront, and then these other identities compound the racialized experiences, or are these other identities, sexuality, for example, are they more important than race? So what's going on here?
Another very good question, Dave. For this particular study, it was about race. We could have looked, I do suggest future work to look into the other intersections of religion, immigration status, sexuality, gender, but this particular study focused on race. So the population was Black. When you talk about LGBTQ, again, which is the current study that I'm looking at, I look at that as a multiple minority status situation, whereby you have somebody that is Black, that might be transgender. And so they are a minority within a minority. So what is their experience when you break that down, when break it down based on those intersections, what is their, the level of oppression, or what is it that they experience? And I wouldn't like to say that race comes before gender or comes before sexuality. I think really, and which is something that I stress in my current work, I feel that it's up to the individual to decide whether to them race matters, or whether their sexuality matters, or whether their gender matters. But one point that I want to make is that normally when it comes to our identities, it is really taken out of our hands. It's not up to us how we identify. It is normally the other person, how they see us. So if the person sees me as Black first, before I open my mouth and they realize I'm an immigrant, then as far as they're concerned, race is significant. But when it comes to my work, I am very, very adamant that it's up to the individual to decide, what is what's significant, what isn't, how they want to identify, how they don't want to identify. And so, yeah, so I hope I've answered your question with that.
Yes. Some of these issues are sort of universal, though, the sort of teacher-centered approach to education is still a problem in many quarters. There's very little involvement of students in the learning process in terms of trying to engage them, be more interactive, and to take their ideas, their personal experiences seriously. This is a struggle for education right across the board. So is there a space in the discussion for what is universal as opposed to what is unique for Black students in the education system?
Again, another very good question. I want to say that I'll take that back. I come from Uganda originally, so part of my education was in Uganda. And I really find that a lot of the way I was educated, and if you want to say the kind of topics that we were told about the monarch, we talked about independence, we talked about all these Western aspects. In that sense, I think education is universal. But again, I want to take it back to, I looked into education. The reason I did that is I thought, what is it? Is it different from, one place to another? And I really think it goes back to not where it started, because nobody can really place. There is people were talking about it now. Where did it start? What is it? But if we look at what was it, who was it developed for? Who delivered? The children of the rich, for example, were educated. Boys were educated, not girls. The children of the poor, which comes from that excerpt that I look at, and which makes me, go back to not only education, but I think Black is universal as well. You find that, I've done some research, I've written some blogs on my website about who is Black, where in America, in the UK, in Africa, and it looks like the past, if you're assigned Blackness, it is universal. It is kind of the same experience, not in every way, because there's intersections, there's differences, but the basis is the same. And so I'd like to think that with a little or looking at the research that I've looked at with education, is that I don't know that it's very unique. Yeah, so I think it really depends on, again, those different intersections, which I mean, the different facets, which I said, which are class, your religion, where your geographical location, your gender. Yeah, so I think it goes back very much to that.
We have Cheryl in the chat who made a comment. I have a friend whose children were born here. I suppose she's saying the UK. They were English. They learned English when they started school. They spoke her native language at home. Is there do you sense that there is a disregard for native languages in the education system? Is it promoted? Is being bilingual a plus for students in the English education system, or is English the be all and end all, and everything else, it's inconsequential? And I want to also kind of ask that in the framework of Western European languages as opposed to African languages, right? Because there is a sense in which when we talk about being bilingual, we often think about speaking English and European language, Western European language, or maybe even Eastern European language. But I'm wondering if being bilingual in English and an African language carries the same credibility, the same weight for students who are, do they get the same, oh, wonderful, this is going to enhance your ability to navigate English?
Very good question. And this is really, really, it is something that applies to me. And I want to say that, I want to start off by saying, again, I'm from Uganda. I speak fluent Luganda, and I speak to my children in Luganda at home, regardless of what it is. If we're reading a book in English, I will always try and translate the words in Luganda. And for me, being bilingual is a credit, is an absolute credit, regardless of whether it's bilingual African language and European language, or two European languages. As far as I know, there has been some work that has been done on that, and they say that a child under 2 years of age, it's really, really good to introduce them to other languages then, because it opens up something in their brain that then makes it really easy for them. But what I've seen, speaking to my children in Luganda, and then they speak English, is that the confidence that comes with that, the ability for them to know that actually I can say a word in another language. I mean, the other plus that I found is that I'll be sitting on a bus with so many people, and I'm able to speak to my children, and I could be telling them off, but nobody knows of it. So that is absolutely amazing. So I think it's a credit, gives them so much confidence. It gives them something else for their identity as well. But when you talk about the other part of your question is whether school actually credits or thinks it's just as important. I haven't seen that. I've got to say that I have seen other European languages like French. I've seen German. I haven't seen much of the native or the African languages. And I know that in the playground, when I've spoken to my children in Uganda, I have sometimes, I think some people get terrified. I think, you'll get people that will say to you that, I'm offended. I don't know what you're talking about. I feel left out. So it's a problem more than it is that somebody would be really interested and say, oh, what is it that you're speaking, or what is it that you're saying, or how can I learn that, or how? So yeah, so I've got to say that in the school system, I haven't seen anywhere where a native language, and it could be It could be somewhere that they teach or they introduce other languages. I haven't seen that. I've taken that upon myself, though, to make sure that I give, to me, it is a talent, it's a skill. It is something else that I have, that I don't have to pay. If I take them for French lessons, I have to pay. Luganda, I don't have to. So I take it upon myself to give it to them for free of charge. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. All right. So, Wasuk, okay. We just had a question come in, and I think this will be the last one. It says, do active learning classrooms improve Black pupil outcomes?
Very good question. I mean, I had some of my co-authors actually did say that visual learning was a way that they really, really engaged with. Somebody else talked about modeling. And I went further ahead and said, what do you mean? And they talked about, say, for example, a teacher gives them a formula or tells them they're going to make this in class, and then they have to step back and try and do that in their own way and how they say it. And yeah, interactive learning was something that was brought up that some of my co-authors enjoyed and they learned from. And I think, we're in the 21st century. So I think that in this day and age, we should be seeing a lot more of that. And I think it could be a plus to a good schooling experience of a Black pupil.
All right. And we are talking about the kind of active learning environment where there's not just discussion, but these pupils are allowed to construct their responses or their answers in ways that they're comfortable with, right? So in other words, when it's not really like a rigid math problem, right? It's more like a social issue or a historical issue, then they are allowed to sort of play around with how we can construct responses based on contemporary experiences, our own reading of the history and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you could say that's where talk also comes in, because we talk about letting the pupils talk, because if we let pupils talk, then they can come up with their own ideas, or they can talk about whatever historical aspects that you've just mentioned there. But if we don't give them a chance to talk, then the social issue that we're talking about is really hindered. So absolutely, absolutely.
All right, and there is one. This is the last question. We have questions just coming in, and
Okay.
I think it's a note to the discussion thing that you keep talking about. When you have a discussion, people start engaging more, right? Students too. That's how it is. Okay, so this question, our final question: do we need to push for formal recognition of African languages? Cantonese, this person says, was an alternative available to my children at school. So I guess this is a policy question.
Yeah, policy question. Yes, I didn't get into what sort of, or specifically the language that we could push for. And I wanted to focus on geography and history to begin with, because I know that if we can bring in the histories and if our children can get to understand that and learn that, then I do talk about books written by Black authors that have, that is really, really important. And what I'm hoping is that I've written some African books for children. And what I do within that is I will bring in African names. For example, if I'm talking about mountains, I'll talk about a mountain in Ghana and use the Ghanaian name. Or I will talk about food in Ghana, in Nigeria, and I'll use the Nigerian name. And I'm hoping that that is how I'm introducing the African native languages in the literature that the children are looking at. I know that when it comes to schools and languages, it's really, in the area that I live in London anyway, it's really up to the school to decide what languages. So whether it's Mandarin, whether it's, again, like I said, French or German or Spanish, and also it is at different key stages. So I know that in primary school, they're a bit limited, but when it gets to secondary school, there's a bit more, a lot more languages that the students might have access to if they want to partake in that. But I would say that what I would really recommend is that we introduce this at a very early stage, because like I said, there's literature, there's data to say it suggests that it's really important for the children to get introduced to the languages very early on. That way, when they get to secondary school, which is what happens where I live, they're confident enough, they're interested, they have an idea, they don't have this. But what we have is that they're not introduced to anything like, for example, Spanish, and then they get to secondary school and then we tell them that, oh, there is Spanish, so if you want to, I mean, how do we expect them to even, where are they going to start? They're already starting at they're behind, there's the students or the pupils that maybe have, the parents have the knowledge capital or they have the finance. I've already introduced this at a young age. And so I don't want to go out and say, this is what we need to have in regards to languages, but I know that bilingual, being bilingual is very, very important. It's important to bring it in very early on. But the other thing also that we could do is we could take it upon ourselves to introduce our children to the different languages that we're privileged to be able to speak or to have friends that speak, and then hopefully encourage them to do that at school as well.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we can all agree that this has been a very informative, very insightful presentation, Wasuk. And we have to have a repeat performance in some form. So you look out for some correspondence from us. Okay.
Will do.
All right. So this is it for the Peace Studies speakers series for today, and I want to thank all of you for attending. I just like to remind you to kind of just go to our website, go to the speaker series to see our other speaking events as they are placed on there. And if you want to be included in our newsletter, just send me an email or send Mary Dix-Namagad an email and ask to be included on our mailing list. And so you'll get the correspondence about all our events. All right, so have a productive and peaceful rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.